Ambassador Uma's piercing shriek shatters the tense silence of the Iridian embassy as she bursts from the classified meeting room, her tall, blue-skinned form trembling with rage. Bioluminescent markings pulse erratically across her skin, betraying her inner turmoil. Human diplomats scramble in her wake, their faces etched with shock and concern. "This is unprecedented, unacceptable." Uma's voice booms through the ornate hallways. "I am with child, a human's child." The embassy erupts into chaos. Iridian aides rush to their ambassador's side, while human security personnel move to contain the situation. At the center of the storm stands Donald Ward, the human liaison assigned to Uma, his face a mask of disbelief. "It was just one night," he mutters, running a hand through his hair. "How is this even possible?" Uma whirls on him, her eyes flashing. "Your genetic material has violated our strict reproduction protocols. This threatens everything we've worked for." As if on cue, Uma doubles over, clutching her abdomen. The hybrid pregnancy, mere weeks old, already shows signs of rapid development. An Iridian medical officer rushes to her side, scanner in hand. "Ambassador, your vital signs are fluctuating wildly. We need to get you to the medical bay immediately." Outside the embassy, word spreads like wildfire. Crowds gather, a mix of curiosity seekers and protesters. Human supremacist groups chant slogans celebrating humanity's superior genetics, while Iridian conservatives demand Uma's immediate recall. Inside, Earth's top diplomats huddle in emergency session. The stakes couldn't be higher. The delicate peace negotiations with the technologically advanced Iridians hang by a thread. "We need to contain this," barks the Secretary of State. "Get Ward into protective custody. Now!" As security escorts a dazed Donald from the embassy, a fleet of sleek Iridian ships pierces Earth's atmosphere. The vessels, carrying Iridia's foremost medical experts, streak across the sky in a dazzling display of faster-than-light technology. In a secure facility beneath the Pentagon, the newly formed United Earth Government Task Force springs into action. Screens flicker to life, displaying real-time data on Uma's rapidly progressing pregnancy. "Look at these readings," a scientist exclaims, pointing to a holographic display. "The genetic markers. They're unlike anything we've ever seen. This could revolutionize our understanding of biology itself." Back at the embassy, Uma lies on an examination table, surrounded by a team of Iridian and human doctors. The hybrid fetus grows at an astonishing rate, its unique genetic makeup defying all known laws of both human and Iridian biology. As Uma grapples with the physical and emotional toll of her unprecedented pregnancy, Donald Ward sits in a sterile interrogation room, coming to terms with his new reality as the first human to successfully reproduce with an alien species. "I never meant for this to happen," he says to his reflection in the one-way mirror. "But now that it has, what does this mean for all of us?" The question hangs in the air, unanswered. Beyond the walls of his confinement, the world teeters on the brink of interstellar conflict, all because of one unexpected night between two species. The future of human-alien relations hangs in the balance, with Uma's growing child at the center of the storm. The world held its breath as Uma's unprecedented pregnancy unfolded. Barely a week had passed since the shocking revelation, and already the situation had escalated beyond anyone's wildest imagination. A hush fell over the crowd gathered outside the Iridian embassy as a massive bioorganic ship descended from the sky. Its iridescent surface rippled and pulsed, captivating human onlookers who had never seen such advanced technology up close. As the ship touched down, a hatch unsealed with a soft hiss, revealing the imposing figure of Zorak, the senior Iridian diplomat dispatched by the High Council. Zorak's deep purple skin gleamed in the sunlight, his silver eyes scanning the crowd with an unreadable expression. He strode purposefully towards the embassy, flanked by a contingent of Iridian guards. The humans parted before him, a mixture of awe and trepidation evident on their faces. Inside the embassy, Uma paced restlessly in a private chamber, her swollen abdomen now clearly visible beneath her flowing robes. She paused, placing a hand on her stomach as she felt a flutter of movement. Despite her initial anger and fear, she couldn't help but feel a growing connection to the life within her. The door slid open, and Donald Ward was escorted in by a team of human security personnel. His eyes widened as he took in Uma's changed appearance. "Uma, he began, but was cut off by the arrival of Zorak. The senior diplomat's presence filled the room, his piercing gaze moving between Uma and Donald. "Ambassador Uma, Mr. Ward," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "We have much to discuss." Over the next hour, Zorak revealed the full extent of the situation. Uma and Donald listened in stunned silence as he explained the unprecedented nature of their child's genetic makeup. The fetus exhibits remarkable cellular regeneration and cognitive potential, Zorak stated, projecting a holographic image of the child's rapidly developing neural network. This discovery has sent shockwaves through our scientific community. Uma's bioluminescent markings pulsed erratically as she processed this information. "What does this mean for our child?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zorak's expression softened slightly. "It means, Ambassador, that your child may hold the key to advancements we've only dreamed of. But it also means that you and Mr. Ward are now at the center of a political firestorm." As if to underscore his point, a commotion could be heard outside the embassy. The chants of human supremacist groups mingled with the angry cries of Iridian conservatives, creating a cacophony of tension and fear. Donald ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that was becoming all too familiar. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Zorak activated another holographic display, this time showing a detailed schematic of a space station. "In the interest of your safety and the continued study of this unprecedented pregnancy, the High Council proposes that you both be moved to a neutral location, this orbital facility." Uma's eyes widened. "You want to quarantine us?" "It's for your own protection," Zorak assured her, "and to ensure that we can monitor the pregnancy without interference." As Uma and Donald grappled with this new development, preparations for their departure began in earnest. Dr. Elena Volkov, the renowned xenobiologist, arrived at the embassy to brief them on the medical aspects of their upcoming quarantine. "I understand this is a lot to take in," Dr. Volkov said, her keen eyes taking in Uma's condition. "But I assure you, we'll be doing everything in our power to ensure the health and safety of both you and your child." In the days that followed, Uma and Donald found themselves drawn closer together by their shared experience. As they packed for their journey to the space station, they began to talk more openly about their feelings and fears. "I never thought I'd be in this position," Uma confessed one evening, her hand resting on her growing belly. "But now that I am, I can't help but feel protective of this child." Donald nodded, reaching out hesitantly to place his hand next to hers. "I know what you mean. It's terrifying and amazing all at once." The day of their departure arrived all too soon. As they boarded the shuttle that would take them to the orbital facility, the world watched with anxious anticipation. Protesters and supporters alike gathered to witness this historic moment. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Uma and Donald exchanged a look of understanding. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The future of human-Iridian relations hung in the balance, with their unborn child at the center of it all. The shuttle lifted off, carrying its precious cargo into the stars. On the ground, Dr. Volkov watched its ascent, her mind already racing with the possibilities that lay ahead. As the vessel disappeared from view, she turned to her team. "Let's get to work," she said, her voice filled with perseverance. "We have a lot to prepare for." The shuttle's ascent through Earth's atmosphere was smooth, but Uma's nerves were anything but. As they approached the orbital station, she wrapped his hand around the chairs of her seat, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with anxiety. Donald, seated beside her, noticed her discomfort and hesitantly placed his hand over hers. "We're almost there," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. Uma nodded, her silver eyes meeting his. For a moment, the tension between them softened, replaced by a shared sense of uncertainty about what lay ahead. As the shuttle docked with the station, Dr. Elena Volkov's voice came over the intercom. "Ambassador Uma, Mr. Ward, please proceed directly to the medical bay upon disembarking. We need to conduct an immediate examination." The urgency in Dr. Volkov's tone sent a ripple of concern through the shuttle's occupants. As they filed out into the station's sterile corridors, Uma suddenly stumbled, a wave of dizziness washing over her. "Uma!" Donald exclaimed, catching her arm to steady her. "Are you all right?" Before she could respond, Uma doubled over, clutching her swollen abdomen. A gasp escaped her lips as she felt a surge of movement within her, far more intense than anything she had experienced before. Dr. Volkov rushed forward, her face etched with concern. "We need to get her to the medical bay now," she ordered, gesturing for the medical team to bring a hovering stretcher. As they rushed through the station's corridors, Uma's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her skin flickered with erratic patterns of bioluminescence, a clear sign of distress to those familiar with Iridian physiology. In the medical bay, a team of human and Iridian specialists sprang into action. Dr. Volkov activated an advanced Iridian medical scanner, its holographic display filling the air above Uma's body. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Volkov murmured, her eyes widening as she interpreted the data. "The fetus, it's developing at an exponential rate. It's already equivalent to a human pregnancy at 20 weeks. Donald, who had refused to leave Uma's side, stared at the holographic image in disbelief. "How is that possible? It's only been a few weeks since—" Dr. Volkov shook her head, her fingers flying over the controls of the medical equipment. "The hybrid nature of the fetus is resulting in a gestation period unlike anything we've ever seen. Ambassador, your body is under tremendous strain. We need to stabilize you immediately." Uma nodded weakly, her breath coming in short gasps. As the medical team worked to stabilize her condition, Donald found himself holding her hand, offering what comfort he could. Hours passed in a blur of medical procedures and tense monitoring. Finally, Uma's condition stabilized, though Dr. Volkov made it clear that she would require constant observation. As the initial crisis passed, Donald found himself spending more and more time at Uma's bedside. Their forced proximity and shared experience began to break down the barriers between them. "I never thought I'd be in this situation," Uma confessed one evening, her hand resting on her rapidly growing belly. "But now, I find myself wondering about our child's future." Donald nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I know what you mean. It's terrifying and amazing all at once." As they talked, neither was aware of the political storm brewing beyond the confines of the station. On Earth, Victor Kane, leader of a human supremacist group, was capitalizing on the public's fascination with the hybrid pregnancy. "This proves the superiority of human genetics," Kane declared in a viral video broadcast. "We should be seeking out more unions with alien species, not shying away from them." His inflammatory rhetoric spread like wildfire, exacerbating tensions between humans and Iridian residents on Earth. Meanwhile, on Iridia, the conservative purist faction gained significant political ground. Their calls for the recall of all Iridian diplomats from Earth grew louder by the day, citing fears of genetic contamination. Oblivious to these developments, Dr. Volkov made a startling discovery during one of her routine examinations of Uma. The holographic display flickered, showing unusual energy patterns emanating from the fetus. "This is remarkable," Dr. Volkov breathed, her eyes wide with excitement. "The fetus is exhibiting signs of enhanced psionic abilities. This could revolutionize our understanding of both human and Iridian genetics." As the implications of this discovery began to sink in, Zorak, the senior Iridian diplomat, received a coded transmission from the Iridian High Council. His expression grew grave as he decoded the message. Unbeknownst to Zorak, his communications had been intercepted by Earth's intelligence agencies. In a secure facility on Earth, Commander Jack Harper received his orders. "Your mission is clear, Commander," his superior stated. "Ensure that the hybrid child remains under human control. Use any means necessary." As these various factions set their plans in motion, the orbital station continued its silent rotation above the Earth. Within its walls, Uma and Donald remained unaware of the forces converging upon them, focused instead on the miraculous life growing within Uma at an astonishing rate. Dr. Volkov, caught between her scientific fascination and growing ethical concerns, began to formulate a plan. As she watched Uma and Donald grow closer, she realized that the future of human-Iridian relations might depend on more than just the child they were creating. The station's systems began to register unusual energy fluctuations, possibly linked to the growing psionic abilities of the unborn child. As alarms began to sound, Dr. Volkov knew that time was running out. Whatever was going to happen, it would happen soon. Soon. As if on cue, the station's alarms began blaring, their harsh sound cutting through the relative calm of the medical bay. Dr. Volkov's eyes widened as she glanced at the monitors. The fetus! Its psionic activity is off the charts, she exclaimed, her fingers flying over the controls. Uma gasped, her body racked with sudden pain. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin flashed erratically, pulsing in sync with the waves of agony coursing through her. Donald gripped her hand tightly, his face etched with concern. "What's happening?" he demanded, looking frantically between Uma and Dr. Volkov. The doctor's expression was grim as she interpreted the data streaming across her screens. The hybrid fetus has developed to the equivalent of a human's third trimester in a matter of weeks. Its psionic abilities are causing massive electromagnetic disturbances throughout the station. As if to underscore her words, the lights in the medical bay flickered ominously. The holographic displays surrounding Uma's bed wavered and distorted, their images breaking apart into indecipherable static. "We need to stabilize her condition," Dr. Volkov ordered, her voice sharp with urgency, "and find a way to contain these energy emissions before they compromise life support." The medical team sprang into action, administering a cocktail of human and iridian medications designed to ease Uma's pain and regulate the fetus's rapid development. Donald watched helplessly as Uma writhed on the bed, her silver eyes wide with fear and confusion. Outside the medical bay, chaos reigned. The station's systems fluctuated wildly, plunging entire sections into darkness before flooding them with blinding light. Communication channels filled with static, cutting off the station from Earth and Iridia alike. In the docking bay, a shuttle bearing the insignia of a routine supply mission touched down. As the airlock cycled open, Commander Jack Harper stepped out, his face an impassive mask. He nodded to his team, a group of nondescript men and women who quickly dispersed throughout the station. "Remember," Harper's voice crackled through their secure comm channel, "our primary objective is extraction. We get the Iridian and the hybrid child. Use whatever force necessary." As Harper's team moved into position, Zorak, the senior Iridian diplomat, found himself growing increasingly uneasy. The newly arrived supply team moved with a purpose that seemed at odds with their stated mission. His compound eyes narrowed as he observed their movements on the station's internal sensors. "Increase security around the medical bay," he ordered his Iridian security team. "Something isn't right about these new arrivals." In the midst of this growing tension, Donald Ward found himself torn between staying by Uma's side and investigating the commotion outside. His protective instincts, heightened by the impending birth of his child, warred with his natural curiosity and suspicion. "I'll be right back," he promised Uma, squeezing her hand gently. She nodded weakly, her skin still pulsing with erratic bioluminescence. Donald slipped out of the medical bay, his eyes adjusting to the flickering lights of the corridor. He made his way to a nearby computer terminal, using his clearance as a diplomat to access the station's communication logs. What he found chilled him to the bone. Intercepted transmissions from both Earth and Iridia revealed plans to seize control of the hybrid child. The implications were clear. Neither side could be trusted with the safety of his unborn child. With a newfound sense of urgency, Donald hurried back to the medical bay. He found Uma's condition stabilized, but the worry lines on Dr. Volkov's face told him they weren't out of danger yet. "We need to get out of here," he said quietly to Uma, leaning close to her ear. "It's not safe for our child." Uma's silver eyes met his, a flicker of understanding passing between them. Despite their initial mistrust and the circumstances of their child's conception, they had forged a bond over the past weeks, a bond that now compelled them to protect their unborn child at all costs. "But how?" Uma whispered, her voice weak but determined. "The station is in lockdown, and we're surrounded by people who want to take our baby." Donald's mind raced, considering and discarding options. Then he remembered something he had overheard Dr. Volkov discussing with her team, a secret project she had been working on. "I have an idea," he said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. but we'll need Dr. Volkov's help. As Donald began to outline his plan to Uma in hushed tones, the situation outside the station continued to deteriorate. On Earth, Victor Kane's inflammatory speeches ignited a powder keg of tension between humans and Iridian residents. Cities across the globe erupted in violent clashes, forcing the United Earth government to declare a state of emergency. Meanwhile, on Iridia, the purist faction led by High Counselor Vexara seized control in a swift and brutal coup. As the moderate government fell, Vexara wasted no time in issuing her ultimatum to Earth: surrender Uma and the hybrid child within 48 hours, or face the consequences. Back on the station, Commander Harper and his team inched closer to the medical bay, engaged in a tense standoff with Zorak's Iridian security forces. The air crackled with tension, both sides knowing that a single wrong move could ignite a firefight. In the medical bay, Dr. Volkov listened intently as Donald explained his discovery and proposed escape plan. Her eyes widened as she realized the full implications of the situation. "A prototype stealth shuttle," she murmured, her mind racing. "It's not fully tested, but it might be our only chance." As they began to fine-tune their escape plan, Uma suddenly cried out in pain. Her body convulsed as a massive surge of psionic energy emanated from her swollen belly. "The baby's coming," Dr. Volkov announced, her voice tight with tension. "And it's bringing down the entire station with it." The lights in the medical bay exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging them into darkness. Emergency klaxons wailed as the station systems crashed one by one. In the distance, the sounds of gunfire erupted as Harper's team and Zorak's forces finally clashed. Donald scooped Uma into his arms, her slight Iridian frame trembling with contractions. "We need to move now," he urged, turning to Dr. Volkov. "Lead the way to the shuttle." As they stepped into the chaos of the darkened corridor, Donald knew their journey was just beginning. With Uma in labor, hostile forces closing in, and two species on the brink of war, their escape would push them to their limits. But as he felt the first kick of his unborn child against his arm, Donald knew he would stop at nothing to ensure their safety. The trio moved swiftly through the station's winding corridors, guided by Dr. Volkov's knowledge and the intermittent flashes of Uma's bioluminescence. The fate of two worlds now rested on their shoulders, and the clock was ticking. Ticking. With a nod to Dr. Volkov, Donald tightened his grip on Uma and pressed forward. They navigated through the labyrinth of darkened corridors, the sounds of battle growing louder behind them. Uma's breathing became more labored, her contractions intensifying with each step. "We're almost there," Dr. Volkov whispered, leading them to a sealed door at the end of a narrow passageway. As she input the access code, the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a sleek, unmarked shuttle. Its matte, black surface seemed to absorb the emergency lights, giving it an almost ethereal quality. "Our ticket out of here," Donald breathed, a mix of relief and apprehension in his voice. They quickly boarded the shuttle, Dr. Volkov taking the pilot's seat while Donald settled Uma into a makeshift medical bay. The doctor's fingers flew over the controls, initiating the launch sequence. "Hang on," she warned, as the shuttle's engines hummed to life. With a jolt, they detached from the station, just as a massive explosion rocked the structure behind them. Through the view screen, Donald watched in horror as sections of the orbital station began to break apart, the result of the hybrid child's uncontrolled psionic emissions and the ongoing firefight. As they accelerated away from the station, the vast expanse of space revealed a terrifying sight. Earth and Iridian warships had arrived, their weapons primed and ready. Beams of energy crisscrossed the void, narrowly missing their small craft. "Activating cloaking technology," Dr. Volkov announced, her voice tense with concentration. The shuttle's exterior shimmered, then seemed to fade from view. Donald held his breath, watching as the battling fleets grew smaller behind them, apparently unaware of their presence. Uma let out a sharp cry, her body convulsing with another contraction. The shuttle's lights flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment, their cloak wavered. "The baby!" Uma gasped, her silver eyes wide with pain and fear. "It's coming!" Donald moved to her side, taking her hand in his. "I'm here," he assured her, his own fear scarcely controlled. "We're going to get through this." Dr. Volkov called over her shoulder. "I've set a course for Proxima Centauri B. It's our best chance for a safe haven. As the shuttle streaked through space, Uma's labor intensified. The hybrid child's psionic abilities surged with each contraction, causing the ship's systems to fluctuate wildly. Alarms blared as navigation systems went haywire, threatening to reveal their position to the warring factions. Donald did his best to comfort Uma, wiping the sweat from her brow as she pushed. Dr. Volkov split her attention between piloting the craft and monitoring Uma's progress, her medical training proving invaluable in this crisis. Hours passed in a blur of pain, fear, and grit. As they approached the Proxima Centauri system, Uma gave one final tremendous push. A burst of psionic energy pulsed through the shuttle, momentarily overloading all systems. In the sudden silence that followed, a new sound filled the air, the cry of a newborn child. Donald stared in awe at the tiny being in his arms. The baby girl's skin shimmered with a pale blue luminescence, her eyes shifting colors like a kaleidoscope. Human and Iridian features blended seamlessly, creating a beauty he had never imagined possible. "Lyra," Uma whispered, her voice filled with love and wonder. "Her name is Lyra." As if in response to her name, baby Lyra opened her eyes wide. A soft glow emanated from her body, enveloping the shuttle in a protective field. The ship's systems stabilized, and the erratic alarms fell silent. Dr. Volkov's voice cut through the moment of tranquility. "We're approaching Proxima Centauri B. Prepare for atmospheric entry." Donald secured Uma and Lyra as best he could, his heart racing as the shuttle began to shake. The view screen filled with the swirling clouds of an alien atmosphere, flashes of lightning illuminating their descent. With expert precision, Dr. Volkov guided the craft through the turbulence, aiming for a forested region far from any signs of civilization. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud, settling into a small clearing surrounded by towering alien flora. "We made it," Donald exhaled, the reality of their situation slowly sinking in. As they emerged from the shuttle, the group was met with the sight of a truly alien world. The forest around them pulsed with bioluminescent life, the air thick with unfamiliar scents and sounds. Using supplies from the shuttle, they quickly established a makeshift camp, creating a protective shelter for Uma and Lyra. Donald and Dr. Volkov worked tirelessly to camouflage their presence, wary of any potential threats. As night fell on their first day on Proxima Centauri B, Donald sat beside Uma, cradling Lyra in his arms. The infant's eyes darted around, taking in her new surroundings with an awareness that seemed beyond her few hours of life. Suddenly, Lyra stretched out a tiny hand toward a nearby plant. To Donald's amazement, the alien flora responded, its tendrils reaching out to gently caress the child's fingers. A soft glow passed between them, and the plant seemed to grow more vibrant. "Did you see that?" Donald whispered, awestruck. Uma nodded, her expression a mix of pride and concern. "She's connecting with this world in ways we can't even begin to understand." As they marveled at their daughter's abilities, none of them noticed the faint glint of a scope in the distant trees. Captain Elias Drake lowered his binoculars, his weathered face creased with intrigue. "Well, well," he murmured to his scouting party, "looks like we've got some interesting new neighbors." The future of two worlds now rested in the hands of a hybrid child on an alien planet, with unforeseen challenges and dangers lurking just beyond the glow of their campfire. As Donald and Uma held their daughter close, they knew their journey was far from finished. The true test of their love, their resilience, and their ability to protect Lyra was only just beginning. The true test of their love, their resilience, and their ability to protect Lyra was only just starting. As dawn broke over the alien landscape, casting a soft purple glow across the clearing, Donald noticed movement in the tree line. He tensed, instinctively pulling Uma and Lyra closer. "We've got company," he whispered, nodding towards the forest. A group of figures emerged from the shadows, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. At their head strode a tall, weathered man with piercing blue eyes and a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard. "Well now," the man called out, his voice carrying a hint of amusement, "I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Captain Elias Drake, at your service." Donald stood, placing himself between the newcomers and his family. "Donald Patel," he replied, his voice steady despite the tension in his muscles. "This is Uma, Dr. Volkov, and our daughter, Lyra." Drake's eyes widened as they fell on the infant in Uma's arms. "Fascinating," he murmured, taking a step closer. "I've never seen anything quite like her." Uma's arms tightened around Lyra, her silver eyes narrowing. The baby gurgled, reaching out a tiny hand towards the captain. To everyone's amazement, a nearby vine stretched towards Lyra, its leaves unfurling to brush against her fingers. Drake's expression softened. "It seems your little one has quite the green thumb," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "We've been trying to cultivate crops here for months with limited success. Perhaps we could help each other?" Over the next few weeks, an uneasy alliance formed between the fugitives and Drake's colony. The settlers provided them with a secure compound within their hidden settlement, while Lyra's unique abilities helped the colonists thrive in the alien environment. Donald watched in awe as Lyra grew at an astonishing rate, reaching the size of a human toddler in mere weeks. Her psionic powers expanded dramatically, allowing her to communicate telepathically with the local flora and fauna. One afternoon, as Donald and Uma worked in the alien gardens, Lyra toddled between the rows of shimmering, iridescent plants. She stopped before a withered stalk, placing her tiny hands on its surface. A soft glow emanated from her palms, and within moments, the plant straightened, its leaves unfurling and vibrant once more. "She's incredible," Uma breathed, her eyes shining with pride and wonder. Donald nodded, wrapping an arm around Uma's waist. As they stood there watching their daughter, he felt a surge of emotion. Despite their initial mistrust in the circumstances of Lyra's conception, their bond had deepened into something profound. That night, as Lyra slept peacefully in her crib, Donald and Uma found themselves exploring the physical aspects of their relationship more intimately. Their bodies moved together in a dance of discovery, each touch and caress revealing new aspects of their biological differences and similarities. As they lay entwined afterwards, Uma traced the contours of Donald's face with her bioluminescent fingers. "I never imagined I could feel this way about a human," she whispered. Donald kissed her gently. "And I never dreamed I'd find love with an Iridian," he replied. "But here we are, creating something beautiful together." Their moment of peace was shattered by the blaring of alarms. Captain Drake's voice crackled over the compound's communication system. "Alert! Multiple ships detected entering the system. All colonists report to your designated stations immediately." Donald and Uma sprang into action, Donald scooping up a still-sleeping Lyra while Uma grabbed their emergency packs. They rushed to the colony's command center, where Dr. Volkov and Captain Drake were huddled over a holographic display. "Earth ships," Drake growled, pointing to a cluster of red dots. "And those," he added, indicating another group of markers, "are definitely Iridian." Donald felt his heart race. "They've found us," he said, his voice tight with fear. Uma's eyes flashed with drive. "We won't let them take Lyra," she declared. As the colony mobilized its defenses, Lyra stirred in Donald's arms. Her eyes, swirling with colors, snapped open. She reached out, touching the holographic display. Suddenly, the room was filled with vivid telepathic visions. Colonists gasped as they saw images of a harmonious future, humans and Iridians working side by side, their strengths complementing each other. The visions showed thriving cities, advanced technologies, and a sense of unity that transcended species. "She's projecting these visions across vast distances," Dr. Volkov exclaimed, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "She's reaching both humans and Iridians." As the intensity of Lyra's visions increased, the approaching ships slowed their advance. Communications channels crackled to life, filled with confused chatter from both human and Iridian crews. In the midst of this chaos, another alert sounded. A small, sleek ship had broken away from the human fleet, descending rapidly towards the planet's surface. "That's a stealth craft," Drake muttered, his brow furrowed. "Whoever's on board knows exactly where to find us." As the mysterious ship entered the atmosphere, Lyra's eyes locked onto Donald's. Her tiny voice, clear and strong, echoed in his mind. "Daddy, someone's coming. Someone important." The colony's cloaking technology hummed to life, shielding them from the approaching vessels. Donald and Uma shared a look of unyielding commitment as they carried Lyra to a secure bunker deep underground. As the heavy doors sealed behind them, they could hear the distant roar of ships entering the planet's atmosphere. In the tense silence that followed, Donald held Uma and Lyra close. Whatever came next, they would face it together, a family unlike any the universe had ever seen, standing at the crossroads of two civilizations. Species, standing at the crossroads of two worlds. The future hung in the balance, uncertain and fraught with danger. Hours passed in tense silence as they waited for news from the surface. Lyra, her growth accelerating at an astonishing rate, now resembled a human 5-year-old. Her eyes, swirling with otherworldly colors, darted around the bunker as if seeing beyond its walls. Suddenly she spoke, her voice clear and strong. "They're here. Many ships. Different people." Donald and Uma exchanged worried glances. "Who's here, sweetheart?" Uma asked gently. Lyra's brow furrowed in concentration. "Humans. Iridians. Some want to help. Some don't." Before they could question her further, Captain Drake's voice crackled over the intercom. "Our cloaking technology is holding. Multiple ships have entered the atmosphere, but they're spreading out across the planet's surface. We're initiating defensive protocols." As Drake spoke, Lyra closed her eyes, her small form glowing faintly. Uma gasped as she felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through her body. New patterns of bioluminescence flickered across her skin, and her senses sharpened dramatically. "Donald," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe and fear. "Something's happening to me." Dr. Volkov, who had been monitoring their vital signs, rushed over with her scanner. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Uma, your genetic structure is evolving. It seems prolonged exposure to Lyra's psionic field is triggering latent potential in your DNA." Donald took Uma's hand, marveling at the intricate patterns now dancing across her skin. "Are you in pain?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Uma shook her head. "No, it's incredible. I can sense so much more now. The planet, the life around us, even you, Donald. It's like I'm connected to everything." As they grappled with this new development, Lyra's eyes snapped open. She reached out, touching a nearby wall. To everyone's amazement, bioluminescent vines began to sprout from the point of contact, quickly spreading throughout the bunker. "Lyra, what are you doing?" Donald asked, watching as the vines formed intricate patterns on the walls and ceiling. "Helping," Lyra replied simply. "They protect us. They watch." Over the next few days, reports from the surface painted a complex picture. Commander Jack Harper's team had landed nearby, their advanced technology allowing them to detect traces of Lyra's unique energy signature. Victor Kane's forces were establishing a fortified outpost, their aggressive tactics disrupting the local ecosystem. And on the far side of the planet, Zorak's Iridian Resistance Group was investigating unusual biological phenomena. Captain Drake, ever vigilant, deployed hidden sensor arrays to monitor the movements of these new arrivals. The colonists worked tirelessly to reinforce their defenses, all while maintaining the illusion of an uninhabited world. Uma's transformation continued, her connection to the planet deepening with each passing hour. Through Lyra, she formed a telepathic link with the alien ecosystem, gaining insights that left her both exhilarated and overwhelmed. One evening, as Donald and Uma stood at the edge of the colony's hidden perimeter, they watched in awe as Lyra manipulated the local flora on a massive scale. Bioluminescent plants sprouted and grew at her command, forming a living barrier that served as both camouflage and an early warning system. "She's incredible," Donald murmured, pulling Uma close. "And so are you." Uma turned to him, her silver eyes shimmering with an inner light. "I never imagined I could feel so connected to a world that isn't my own," she said softly, "or to someone from another species." Their lips met in a tender kiss, the stress of their situation and the wonder of their unique bond fueling a passionate embrace. As they held each other under the alien sky, the bioluminescent plants around them pulsed in sync with their heartbeats. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by an urgent call from Dr. Volkov. "Donald, Uma, you need to see this!" Her voice crackled over their communicators. They rushed to the command center, where Drake, Volkov, and other colony leaders were gathered around a holographic display. The image showed a massive energy buildup near Iridia. "We've intercepted communications from both human and Iridian sources," Drake explained grimly. "It seems the High Counselor has decided to deploy some kind of superweapon. They're targeting Earth." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Suddenly, Lyra burst into the room, her eyes wide with fear. "No!" she cried out, her small body trembling. "They can't!" A wave of psionic energy exploded from Lyra, so powerful it knocked everyone off their feet. Alarms blared as systems throughout the colony went haywire. The cloaking field flickered and died, leaving the settlement exposed. As they scrambled to their feet, Uma pulled Lyra into her arms, trying to calm her. "What is it, sweetheart? What did you see?" Lyra's voice echoed in their minds, filled with terror and urgency. "Death! So much death! We have to stop them!" Donald looked at the others, his face set with tenacity. "Our location's been compromised. It's only a matter of time before the factions find us, and now Earth is in danger." Captain Drake nodded grimly. "We need to prepare for first contact, and fast." As if on cue, the long-range sensors lit up with multiple signals converging on their location. The hidden colony stood revealed, caught in the crosshairs of multiple factions, each with their own agenda. And beyond the skies of Proxima Centauri B, a weapon of unimaginable power prepared to unleash devastation on Earth. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of not just their small group, but potentially two entire civilizations. As Donald, Uma, and Lyra stood together, they knew that everything they had fought for, everything they had built, would be tested in the crucible of what was to come. Come! The future hung in the balance, uncertain and fraught with danger. Suddenly, Lyra's tiny body began to glow with an intense, pulsating light. Her eyes flew open, swirling with a kaleidoscope of colors. "No!" she cried out, her voice echoing through the bunker with a force that belied her small stature. A wave of psionic energy exploded from Lyra, knocking everyone off their feet. The bunker's systems went haywire, alarms blaring as screens flickered and sparked. Donald felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as he realized what was happening. "The cloaking field!" he gasped, scrambling to his feet. "It's down!" Uma clutched Lyra close, her newly developed bioluminescent patterns pulsing erratically. "What did you see, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lyra's voice echoed in their minds, filled with terror and urgency. "Death! So much death! We have to stop them." Captain Drake's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with tension. "We've been compromised, multiple signals converging on our location. Prepare for first contact." As if on cue, the long-range sensors lit up with a flurry of activity. Donald shared a grim look with Uma. "We need to get topside," he said, helping her to her feet. They emerged from the bunker to find the colony in chaos. Colonists rushed to defensive positions, while Dr. Volkov coordinated emergency protocols. In the distance, they could see the glint of approaching vehicles. "It's Harper's team," Drake announced, joining them with a pair of high-powered binoculars. "They're approaching cautiously, weapons ready but not raised." Donald took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "We need to meet them. Show them we're not a threat." Drake nodded, his face set in iron will. "Agreed. You two come with me. The rest of you maintain defensive positions, but do not engage unless fired upon." As they made their way to the colony's perimeter, Uma's bioluminescent patterns began to pulse in a steady, rhythmic pattern. Donald felt an unexpected wave of calm wash over him, and he noticed the tension in Drake's posture ease slightly. They reached the edge of the settlement just as Harper's team arrived. For a moment, both groups stood frozen, weapons at the ready but not aimed. The silence stretched thin, like a wire about to snap. Then Uma stepped forward, her silver eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. "We mean you no harm," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the space between them. "We seek only peace and understanding between our peoples." Harper lowered his weapon slightly, his eyes widening as he took in Uma's appearance. "What are you?" he asked, his voice a mix of awe and wariness. Before Uma could respond, a commotion erupted from the far side of the colony. Victor Kane's forces had arrived. their vehicles tearing across the alien landscape with reckless abandon. Lyra, still in Uma's arms, let out a cry of distress. Suddenly, the ground beneath Kane's approaching forces erupted with rapidly growing vegetation. Massive vines and thorny bushes sprang up, forming a dense, impassable barrier. Harper's team watched in amazement as the alien flora responded to Lyra's will. "That child," Harper breathed. "She's controlling the planet itself." As if in response to his words, Lyra's power surged once more. A shimmering energy dome materialized around the entire colony, its surface rippling with patterns of light that mirrored Uma's bioluminescence. In the distance, another group appeared on the horizon. The sleek, organic shapes of their vehicles marked them as Iridian. Zorak's resistance had arrived. "This is insane," Drake muttered, watching as the various factions converged on their position. "We're outgunned and outnumbered." Donald placed a hand on Drake's shoulder. "Maybe not," he said, nodding towards Uma and Lyra. "I think we have something they all want, and that gives us leverage." As the standoff intensified, with weapons drawn on all sides, Uma stepped forward once more. Her body glowed with an intense inner light, her voice carrying across the battlefield with surprising authority. "Listen to me, all of you," she began. "We stand at a crossroads. The choices we make here today will shape the future of both our species." But before she could continue, Lyra let out a piercing cry. The air around them seemed to vibrate, and suddenly, everyone present found themselves assaulted by a barrage of vivid mental images. They saw Earth, beautiful and blue, suspended in the void of space. Then a massive energy weapon, its power beyond comprehension, opening fire. The planet's surface boiled and cracked, entire continents vanishing in flashes of light. As the vision faded, leaving them all shaken, Commander Harper stepped forward. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with willpower. "We need to talk," he said, lowering his weapon completely. "All of us. Because if what I just saw is true, we have a much bigger problem on our hands." The other factions, still reeling from Lyra's telepathic broadcast, began to lower their weapons as well. Even Kane's forces, split between those loyal to their leader and those swayed by the vision, ceased their attempts to breach Lyra's barriers. As the various groups cautiously approached the colony, the alien ecosystem around them continued to respond to Lyra's distress. Strange weather patterns formed overhead, while exotic creatures emerged from the undergrowth, forming a living perimeter around the settlement. Donald and Uma exchanged a look of mingled hope and fear. They had avoided immediate conflict, but the real challenge was just beginning. With the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance, they would need to navigate the treacherous waters of interspecies diplomacy, all while protecting their extraordinary daughter from those who would seek to control or exploit her power. As the leaders of the various factions gathered for what promised to be a tense and pivotal discussion, Donald held Uma and Lyra close. Whatever came next, they would face it together. A family unlike any the universe had ever seen, standing at the crossroads of two civilizations. The future hung in the balance, uncertain and fraught with danger. But for the first time since the crisis began, a glimmer of hope shone through the chaos. The tension in the air was palpable as the leaders of the various factions gathered around a hastily assembled conference table. Donald and Uma stood at the head, Lyra nestled between them, her small form still trembling from the intensity of the vision she had shared. Commander Harper cleared his throat, breaking the uneasy silence. "We need to address the immediate threat to Earth. If what we saw is true, we don't have much time." Zorak, the Iridian resistance leader, nodded gravely. "The weapon you saw is real. It's called the Stellar Obliterator, a creation of High Counselor Vex Ara's twisted ambitions." As the group delved into strategic discussions, Lyra's body began to change before their eyes. Her form stretched and shifted, her features maturing at an alarming rate. Within hours, she resembled a human preteen, her silver eyes wide with a mix of fear and tenacity. "I can hear them," Lyra said suddenly, her voice stronger and more assured than before. "The Iridian ships in Earth's orbit. I can see through their eyes." Dr. Volkov rushed to Lyra's side, medical scanner in hand. "Fascinating," she muttered, studying the readings. Her psionic abilities are expanding exponentially. Captain Drake leaned forward, his tactical mind already at work. Can you give us any information about the weapon? Its weaknesses, defenses? Lyra closed her eyes, concentrating. The air around her shimmered with psionic energy. It's massive, she said, her voice distant. Multiple layers of energy shielding, but there's a vulnerability in the main power core. If we could get close enough... Commander Harper's eyes lit up. The stealth shuttle prototype, if we can modify it with Iridian tech, we might have a chance of getting past their defenses. Zorak nodded, his alien features set in stubborn persistence. My people can provide the necessary modifications, but who will pilot such a dangerous mission? Donald stepped forward, his teeth gritted. I will. I have experience with both human and Iridian systems. I'm the logical choice. Uma's hand tightened on his arm, her newly developed bioluminescent patterns pulsing with anxiety. Donald, no, it's too dangerous. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the colony. Victor Kane's forces had launched a surprise attack on the communications array, their energy weapons lighting up the night sky. They're trying to cut off Lyra's link to the Iridian ships, Drake shouted over the chaos. Defend the array at all costs. The colonists sprang into action, their makeshift defenses holding against the initial assault. But it was the planet itself that turned the tide. Massive vines erupted from the ground, entangling Kane's vehicles. Swarms of bioluminescent insects descended on his troops, their bright lights disorienting and confusing the attackers. In the midst of the battle, Donald and Uma found themselves cut off from the others, trapped in a remote section of the colony. As energy blasts rocked the structure around them, they sought shelter in a small storage room. Uma's skin glowed brightly in the darkness, her patterns shifting in sync with her racing heartbeat. Donald, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. If we don't make it through this... He pulled her close, their bodies fitting together despite their biological differences. We will, he assured her. We have to. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, years of uncommitment tension finally breaking free. As they gave in to their desires, neither noticed the subtle changes occurring within Uma's body, her altered physiology responding to Donald's genetic material in ways they couldn't have imagined. Hours later, as the colony recovered from Kane's failed assault, work on the stealth shuttle intensified. Lyra, her powers growing by the minute, assisted in the modifications, manipulating matter at the molecular level to integrate human and Iridian technologies. Dr. Volkov watched the young hybrid with growing concern. Her abilities are incredible, but they're having unforeseen effects on the local ecosystem. We need to find a way to contain her influence before it causes irreversible changes to the planet. Captain Drake nodded grimly. Work with the Iridian scientists. Develop some kind of containment field. We can't risk destabilizing our only safe haven. As the modified shuttle neared completion, a new crisis emerged. Lyra's telepathic link with the Iridian ships suddenly weakened, her face pale with shock. They're moving the weapon, she gasped. Vexara is preparing to attack Earth. We're running out of time. The news sent the colony into a frenzy of activity. Systems were hastily brought online, final modifications made in a desperate rush against time. As Donald prepared for launch, Uma approached him, her face set with tenacity. I'm coming with you, she said, her tone brooking no argument. My new biology makes me more resistant to the rigors of space. You'll need every advantage you can get. Donald opened his mouth to protest, but the look in Uma's eyes stopped him. He simply nodded, knowing that together they stood a better chance of success. As they boarded the shuttle, Lyra rushed to embrace them both. Be careful, she pleaded, her young face etched with worry far beyond her apparent years. With a final look at their daughter, Donald and Uma sealed the shuttle's hatch. As the engines hummed to life, Lyra raised her hands, her entire body glowing with psionic energy. The shuttle's systems surged, its stealth capabilities and propulsion enhanced beyond their design specifications. The small vessel rose from the launch pad, quickly accelerating beyond the atmosphere of Proxima Centauri b. As it disappeared into the depths of space, the assembled colonists and faction leaders watched in tense silence, the fate of two worlds now resting on the success of this desperate mission. Back on the planet's surface, Lyra collapsed, her body convulsing as the strain of her efforts took their toll. Dr. Volkov rushed to her side, her medical scanner beeping urgently. "Her cellular structure is destabilizing," Volkov announced, her voice tight with worry. "The rapid growth in power usage. It's tearing her apart at the molecular level." As the doctor worked frantically to stabilize Lyra's condition, the rest of the colony could only wait and hope. With Earth's destruction looming, Donald and Uma racing through space on a seemingly impossible mission, and their miraculous child fighting for her life, the next few hours would determine the fate of both human and Iridian civilizations. As the colony grappled with Lyra's deteriorating condition, Donald and Uma's shuttle streaked away from Proxima Centauri B, carrying with it the hopes of two worlds. The vessel's engines hummed with an otherworldly energy, a testament to the psionic boost Lyra had imparted before their departure. Uma's eyes widened as she studied the ship's navigation console. "Donald, look at this," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "I can sense the gravitational fields around us. It's like I can see the fabric of space itself." Donald glanced over, his brow furrowing. "That's impossible. Unless—" He trailed off, remembering the changes they'd both undergone since arriving on the alien world. Uma closed her eyes, concentrating. "I can plot a more efficient course. We can cut our travel time by more than half." Without hesitation, Donald input the new coordinates. The shuttle's engines surged, propelling them through space at speeds that defied conventional physics. As the days passed, Uma noticed subtle changes in her body. Her skin glowed with new bioluminescent patterns, pulsing in sync with the ship's systems. She found herself instinctively interfacing with the shuttle's controls, enhancing their stealth capabilities beyond their original design. "Donald," she said softly one night, her hand resting on her abdomen. I think I'm pregnant again." His eyes widened in shock. "But how? The accelerated growth rate we saw with Lyra?" Uma nodded, her expression a mix of wonder and concern. "It's happening even faster this time. I can feel the changes already." As they approached Earth's solar system, the gravity of their mission burdened immensely upon them. Uma's pregnancy progressed rapidly, her body adapting to accommodate the hybrid fetus growing within her. The shuttle's sensors picked up a massive concentration of ships near Mars. Donald zoomed in on the display, his breath catching in his throat. "It's Vexara's superweapon. They're moving it into position between Earth and the Moon." Uma's hands flew over the controls, her new abilities allowing her to interface directly with the ship's systems. "I can mask our approach. They won't see us coming." As they navigated through the gathered fleets, Donald and Uma watched in horror as the superweapon began to power up. Earth loomed large in their view screen, its surface a chaotic swirl of lights and darkness. "Mass evacuations," Donald muttered. "They're preparing for the worst." Uma gritted her teeth, fighting through a contraction. "We won't let it happen. We can't." They approached the massive space station housing the superweapon, its surface filled with defense turrets and energy shields. Uma's enhanced senses detected a vulnerability, an exhaust port leading directly to the main power core. "There," she said, pointing. "That's our way in." Donald maneuvered the shuttle closer, his piloting skills pushed to their limits as he dodged automated defense systems. Uma's labor intensified, her bioluminescent patterns flashing erratically. "Donald," she gasped, "the baby! It's coming now!" He looked at her in panic, then at the shuttle's controls, then at the disruptor device they needed to deploy. "I can't. How can I—" Uma reached out, placing her hand over his. "Together," she said. "We'll do it together." As Vexara's weapon reached critical power levels, Donald guided the shuttle into position. Uma, fighting through her contractions, used her connection to the ship's systems to aim the disruptor device. "Now!" she cried, her voice mixing with the sound of their newborn son's first cry. Donald hit the launch button. The disruptor shot out, streaking towards the exhaust port. It detonated just as Uma delivered their child, the explosion sending shockwaves through the superweapon systems. Alarms blared throughout their shuttle as the space station began to break apart. Donald scooped up their newborn son, cradling him in one arm while piloting with the other. Uma, despite her exhaustion, interfaced with the ship's systems one last time, pushing their engines beyond their limits. They shot away from the disintegrating superweapon, the shuttle shuddering under the strain. Behind them, the gathered fleets of humans and Iridians watched in awe as Vexara's creation imploded, taking with it the threat that had brought two species to the brink of annihilation. As they flew towards the safety of Earth's orbit, Donald looked at Uma and their newborn son. The child's eyes, already open, shimmered with an otherworldly intelligence. In that moment, as Earth grew larger in their view screen and the remains of the superweapon faded into the distance, Donald realized that their journey was not nearly finished. The birth of this new hybrid child, born in the heart of the conflict, had irrevocably altered the fate of both their species. The shuttle's communication system crackled to life, filled with the jubilant cheers of humans and Iridians alike. But for Donald and Uma, their focus remained on their miraculous new child and the uncertain future that lay ahead. The birth of this new hybrid child, born in the heart of the conflict, had irrevocably altered the fate of both their species. As the shuttle sped away from the disintegrating space station, Donald's hands flew over the controls, his expert piloting skills put to the ultimate test. Uma, still weak from the sudden birth, cradled their newborn son close to her chest, her enhanced senses stretching out to guide them through the treacherous debris field. "Bank left," she called out, her voice hoarse but urgent. Donald obeyed without hesitation, the shuttle narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of twisted metal. The baby in Uma's arms, seemingly unperturbed by the chaos around him, opened his eyes. Uma gasped as she saw faint bioluminescent patterns already forming on his skin, pulsing in sync with her own. "Donald, look," she whispered, turning the child so he could see. He's like me, like Lyra." Donald spared a quick glance, his eyes widening in awe before snapping back to the view screen. "We'll name him Orion," he said, a smile tugging at his lips despite the danger. A new constellation for a new era. Suddenly, a massive shockwave rippled through space as the superweapon's power core finally gave way. The shuttle shuddered violently, alarms blaring as systems went haywire. Communications crackled with panicked voices from both human and Iridian ships, many mistaking the explosion for an attack. Uma closed her eyes, focusing her newfound abilities. She reached out, interfacing directly with the shuttle's systems. "I can boost our signal," she said, her voice strained with effort. "We need to tell them what happened before this turns into a bloodbath." Donald nodded, quickly composing a message explaining the situation. As Uma amplified their transmission, his voice rang out across every channel, human and Iridian alike. "This is Donald Reed of the Proxima Centauri colony. The superweapon has been destroyed. I repeat, Vexara's weapon is no more. This was not an attack by either side. Stand down and await further instructions." For a tense moment, silence reigned across the comms. Then a gruff voice responded, "Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force? Reed, what the hell is going on out there?" Before Donald could reply, another voice cut in, the resonant tones of High Commander Zalthrak of the Iridian Armada. "Human vessel, explain yourself immediately." Donald took a deep breath, exchanging a look with Uma. "Admirals, with all due respect, we don't have time for a full debrief right now. What matters is that the threat has been neutralized. I strongly urge both fleets to stand down and assess the situation before any rash actions are taken." There was another pause, filled only by the sound of Orion's soft cooing. Finally, Admiral Chen spoke again. "All Earth Defense Force ships, hold your positions. Do not engage." Zalthrak's voice followed soon after. "Iridian vessels, cease all aggressive maneuvers. Maintain defensive posture only." As the tension in space began to ease, Uma noticed a signal coming from the Earth Defense Force flagship. "Donald," she said softly, "they're requesting we dock with them." Donald hesitated, looking at Uma and their newborn son. "Is it safe? For you and Orion?" Uma nodded slowly. I think we need to do this. They need to see us, to understand what's happened. It might be our only chance to prevent another war. With a grim nod, Donald guided the shuttle towards the imposing Earth Defense Force flagship. As they approached the docking bay, Uma used her abilities to interface with the ship's systems one last time, ensuring their approach wouldn't be seen as a threat. The shuttle touched down gently in the cavernous docking bay. As the engines powered down, Donald and Uma looked at each other, the weight of the moment heavy upon them. "Ready?" Donald asked, reaching out to squeeze her hand. Uma nodded, cradling Orion close. "Together," she replied, her voice filled with purpose. The shuttle's hatch hissed open, revealing a contingent of heavily armed soldiers led by Admiral Chen himself. As Donald and Uma stepped out, a collective gasp rippled through the assembled crew. The sight of Uma, clearly Iridian but caring for a half-human child, caused a stir of whispers and shocked expressions. Admiral Chen stepped forward, his face a mask of carefully controlled surprise. "Mr. Reed," he said, his eyes darting between Donald, Uma, and the child in her arms. "I believe you have quite a story to tell us." Donald nodded, standing tall despite his exhaustion. "Admiral, what you see before you is the future. A future where humans and Iridians not only coexist but thrive together. This is my wife, Uma, and our son, Orion." The Admiral's eyebrows shot up. "Wife? Son? That's impossible." Uma stepped forward, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing gently. "With all due respect, Admiral, we are living proof that it is not only possible but necessary for the survival of both our species." Chen's eyes narrowed, studying the family before him. After a long moment, he turned to a nearby officer. "Contact medical. I want a full examination of all three of them." He looked back at Donald and Uma. "I hope you understand the need for caution." Donald nodded. "Of course, Admiral. We have nothing to hide." As they were led away to the medical bay, Donald couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and apprehension. They had prevented Earth's destruction, but the real challenge, bridging the gap between two vastly different species, was only just beginning. In the sterile confines of the medical bay, surrounded by a mix of curious and wary faces, Donald and Uma prepared themselves for the scrutiny to come. Orion, nestled in Uma's arms, gazed up at the strange new world around him with eyes that seemed far too knowing for a newborn. As the first scans began, the family knew that their actions had set in motion events that would reshape the future of both humanity and the Iridians. The path ahead was uncertain, but they would face it together, a living testament to the potential for unity in a divided universe. As the medical team on the Earth Defense Force flagship conducted their examinations, Donald and Uma exchanged nervous glances. Orion, seemingly unaware of the tension surrounding him, cooed softly in his mother's arms. The doctors and scientists worked meticulously, their eyes widening with each new discovery about the hybrid child and his Iridian mother. Hours passed, and finally, Admiral Chen entered the medical bay, his face a mask of almost unchecked astonishment. "Mr. Reed, Uma," he began, his voice measured, "what you've shown us here today, it changes everything." Donald nodded, relief washing over him. "Admiral, we believe this is just the beginning. There's so much more we need to discuss." Chen's eyes darted between the family and the data screens, displaying the examination results. "Indeed," he said. "I've been in contact with the Iridian High Command. We've agreed to convene an emergency summit on Proxima Centauri B. Your presence will be required." Uma stood, cradling Orion close. "We'll be there, Admiral. This is our chance to bridge the gap between our species." In the days that followed, news of the hybrid child spread like wildfire through both human and Iridian channels. As their shuttle approached Proxima Centauri B, Donald and Uma marveled at the fleet of ships from both races gathered in orbit around the colony world. The newly constructed diplomatic center stood as a testament to the colony's rapid growth, its architecture a blend of human and Iridian design. As Donald and Uma made their way to the main chamber, they were joined by their daughter, Lyra, who had been brought from Earth by a separate transport. The family entered the vast circular chamber, where representatives from Earth and Iridia sat in tense anticipation. All eyes turned to them as they took their place at the center of the room, Donald and Uma standing tall with Lyra and Orion by their sides. High Commander Zalthrak's resonant voice broke the silence. Donald Reed, Uma of Iridia, you stand before us as living proof of what many thought impossible. We are here to determine the path forward for both our species. As the talks began, Donald and Uma shared their experiences, detailing the events that led to their unexpected union and the birth of their hybrid children. Lyra, now a young girl, demonstrated her unique connection to the colony's ecosystem, causing gasps of wonder as she manipulated the bioluminescent plants decorating the chamber. Orion, barely a few months old, astounded the gathered diplomats with his advanced cognitive abilities. When presented with a series of complex mathematical equations, the infant solved them with ease, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly intelligence. As the summit progressed, Uma suddenly doubled over, her bioluminescent patterns flashing erratically. "Donald," she gasped, "it's happening again. The baby." The chamber erupted in a flurry of activity as both human and Iridian medical teams rushed to Uma's aid. Donald supported his wife as she was quickly moved to a prepared medical bay adjacent to the diplomatic center. Representatives from both species watched in awe through a large viewing window as Uma went into labor. Human doctors worked alongside Iridian healers, their combined expertise ensuring the safety of both mother and child. With a final push and a burst of bioluminescence that lit up the entire room, Uma gave birth to a daughter. The newborn's cries were accompanied by a surge of energy that rippled through the colony, causing every bioluminescent plant and animal to pulse in unison. Donald cradled the infant, tears streaming down his face. "Nova," he whispered, the name coming to him instinctively. "We'll call her Nova." As if in response to her name, Nova opened her eyes, revealing irises that shimmered with an iridescent glow. The gathered medical staff gasped as the newborn displayed immediate signs of psionic abilities, levitating small objects around her crib. The birth of Nova became a turning point in the summit. Inspired by the potential displayed by the hybrid children, the Earth and Iridian delegations worked tirelessly to draft a groundbreaking agreement. Days later, Donald and Uma stood before the assembled representatives, Nova cradled in her mother's arms while Lyra and Orion stood proudly beside their father. Admiral Chen stepped forward, his voice filled with conviction. "Today we establish the Interstellar Cooperative Initiative. This program will foster scientific, cultural, and genetic exchange between our species, with Proxima Centauri b serving as its headquarters." High Commander Zalthrak joined him, adding, "As part of this initiative, we will develop a revolutionary genetic therapy based on Uma's unique biology. This will allow interested individuals from both species to increase cross-species compatibility, paving the way for a new era of cooperation and understanding." As the chamber erupted in applause, Donald and Uma exchanged a look of profound joy and hope. Their journey, which had begun with suspicion and conflict, had led to this moment of unity between two vastly different species. Nova stirred in Uma's arms, her tiny hands reaching out towards the assembled crowd. As if in response, the bioluminescent plants throughout the chamber pulsed with a soft, welcoming glow. The sight served as a powerful symbol of the bright future that lay ahead for humans and Iridians alike. With the establishment of the Interstellar Cooperative Initiative, Donald and Uma found themselves at the forefront of a new era. As the appointed directors of the ICI, they faced the monumental task of implementing exchange programs, overseeing collaborative research projects, and establishing new joint colonies. The Proxima Centauri b colony, once a tentative outpost, began to transform rapidly. Human and Iridian engineers worked side by side, blending their technologies and architectural styles to create a truly unique metropolis. The colony's ecosystem, shaped by Lyra's growing influence, became a hotbed for xenobiological research, yielding breakthroughs in medicine and environmental science that benefited both species. As the years passed, Donald and Uma watched their children grow, each developing their unique abilities in ways that continually amazed both humans and Iridians. Lyra's connection to the planet's ecosystem deepened, allowing her to shape and nurture the alien environment in ways never before seen. Orion's cognitive abilities expanded exponentially, his mind grasping concepts that pushed the boundaries of both human and Iridian understanding. Nova, the youngest, displayed a mastery over her psionic abilities that grew more impressive with each passing day. The family became a model for human-iridian integration, their story inspiring others to bridge the gap between the two species. The genetic therapy developed from Uma's biology gained popularity, leading to an increase in cross-species relationships and hybrid children. On the 10th anniversary of the historic summit, the central plaza of the now thriving Proxima Centauri bee colony buzzed with excitement. Humans and Iridians mingled freely, their once stark differences now a source of celebration rather than division. The air was filled with a mix of human music and the harmonic tones of Iridian song, creating a unique symphony that embodied the spirit of their cooperation. Donald and Uma, now visibly older but still bearing the marks of their unique bond, made their way to the center of the plaza. Their children, now adults in their own right, stood nearby, surrounded by a new generation of human Iridian offspring. As they prepared to address the gathered crowd, Uma's hand found Donald's, their fingers intertwining. She looked up at him, her bioluminescent patterns glowing softly in the alien twilight. "Who would have thought," she said, her voice filled with wonder, "that your unexpected fertility would lead to all this?" Donald laughed, pulling her close as they watched their grandchildren, a perfect blend of human and Iridian, play in the bioluminescent gardens that Lyra had cultivated. "Not me," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But I wouldn't change a thing." With a shared nod, they stepped forward to address the crowd, ready to reflect on their journey and the bright future that lay ahead for both their species. As they began to speak, the holographic monument behind them flickered to life, its images telling the story of two worlds brought together by an unexpected love.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.